He thinks he took everything. My G-Wagon, he drives it to his mistress. My $500,000 savings, wired to the Caymans on our anniversary. He kicked me out of the mansion I designed, branding me insane to Seattle's elite. Marcus Sterling thinks he is untouchable, but he made a fatal error. He forgot the contract he signed 7 years ago. That document will turn him from a wealthy CEO into a pauper overnight, tomorrow. I will remind him. My name is Avery Caldwell, and I live in a glass cage floating 40 stories above the gray, rain-slicked streets of Seattle, from the outside. Our penthouse is a testament to modern architectural triumph, a jewel in the crown of the city skyline. It features floor-to-ceiling windows that offer an uninterrupted view of the Space Needle. Italian marble floors that are always cold beneath my bare feet, and a kitchen that costs more than what most people earn in a decade. To the world, I am the enviable wife of Marcus Sterling, the visionary CEO of Sterling Solutions. I am the woman who has it all: the handsome husband, the unlimited credit limit, and the closet filled with seasonal collections from Paris and Milan. But the truth, the one that I swallow down with my morning coffee, is that I am nothing more than an ornament in a house that feels less like a home and more like a high-tech mausoleum. I am 32 years old. Yet I feel ancient. My days are a blur of hollow routines. I arrange flowers that I did not grow. I instruct housekeepers on how to clean surfaces that are never dirty. And I attend luncheons where the conversation revolves around Pilates instructors and the latest cosmetic procedures. I was not always this person. 7 years ago, I was an architect with dirt under my fingernails and graphite stains on my hands. I had a vision for sustainable urban landscapes. I had fire. But that fire was systematically extinguished, replaced by the cold, sterile light of Marcus's ambition. I remember the day I effectively signed my life away. Though I did not know it at the time, Marcus was 29 then. Brilliant but penniless. With a mind full of algorithms and a pocket full of lint. He needed seed money for Sterling Solutions. No bank would touch him. So, I did the only thing I could. I sold the Victorian home my parents had left me. It was the only tangible piece of them I had left. A house that smelled of my mother's baking and my father's pipe tobacco. I sold it for $650,000. I handed every cent to Marcus, trembling as I signed the check. He had held my face in his hands, his eyes wet with gratitude, and swore that we were partners. He swore that my sacrifice was the foundation of our empire. Now, that empire stands tall, but I am no longer a partner. I am a tenant. The shift was subtle at first, like the erosion of a cliff face by the sea, a criticism here, a dismissal there, but lately, the coldness has become absolute. Marcus treats me with a polished indifference that chills me to the bone. He is perfect in public, guiding me by the small of my back at galas, smiling that winning smile for the cameras. But the moment the heavy oak door of our penthouse clicks shut, he transforms. He becomes a stranger who looks through me, not at me. The cracks in the facade began to widen during the charity gala for the Seattle Arts Council 2 weeks ago. The ballroom was stifling, filled with the scent of expensive perfume and desperation. Marcus was holding court near the bar, laughing at a joke made by a senator. As I approached, I noticed something glinting on his wrist. It was a watch I had not seen before, a Patek Philippe Nautilus. I know design, and I know value. That watch was worth at least $100,000. Later that night, while Marcus was in the shower, washing off the scent of other people's adoration, I saw his iPad light up on the nightstand. It was a notification from an email account I rarely checked anymore, our joint household account, which he usually bypassed for his private encrypted server. I swiped it open. There was the receipt. $112,000, paid in full from a hidden sub-account. When I asked him about it the next morning, feigning casual curiosity, he didn't even look up from his espresso. "It was a gift, Avery," he said, his voice smooth and dismissive. "A signing bonus from the Tokyo partners. Don't be so pedestrian." He lied with such ease that it made my stomach turn. But it wasn't just the lies. It was the surveillance. Sterling Solutions specializes in smart home integration, and our penthouse is the flagship model. Everything is connected. The lights, the temperature, the locks, the cameras. Lately, the house felt like it was watching me. The blinds would lower on their own in the middle of the day, casting the living room into gloom. The temperature would drop 5 degrees without anyone touching the thermostat, leaving me shivering in my cashmere sweaters. When I complained, Marcus would sigh, the sound heavy with exaggerated patience. "You are being paranoid," he would say, adjusting his silk tie. "It is a beta system update. It glitches. You have been cooped up in here too long. Avery, it is making you imagine things." He made me feel small. He made me feel crazy. But I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew it with the instinct of a woman who senses the predator in the room before she sees it. My suspicions solidified into a hard, cold knot in my chest 3 days ago. I was looking for a spare charger in Marcus's home office, a room I was technically forbidden from entering. But desperation makes you bold. I opened the top drawer of his mahogany desk, expecting to find cables. Instead, I found a sleek black envelope. Inside were 2 first-class tickets to Aspen for the coming weekend. One ticket was issued to Marcus Sterling. The other was issued to a passenger named Valerie Cross. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the envelope. Valerie. I knew that name. She was his new executive assistant, hired 3 months ago, a 24-year-old business major fresh out of Stanford. I had met her once briefly at the office, a blur of blonde hair and efficiency. I decided to confront him. I couldn't hold the bile down any longer. When Marcus came home that evening, smelling of rain and expensive scotch, I placed the envelope on the kitchen island. "Who is Valerie?" "Marcus," I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound steely. "And why are you taking her to Aspen on a weekend you told me you would be at a conference in Chicago?" Marcus stared at the envelope, his expression unreadable. Then, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. He didn't look guilty. He looked amused. "You went through my desk," he stated. Not a question, but an accusation. He walked over to the refrigerator and poured himself a glass of sparkling water. "Valerie is my assistant. Avery. She is organizing the logistics for the summit. The Aspen trip is for the board of directors retreat. She has to be there to manage the schedule. You really think I would be stupid enough to leave tickets lying around if I were having an affair?" He took a sip of water, his eyes boring into mine. "You are hysterical. It is embarrassing. This is exactly why I don't take you to these events anymore. You have lost your grip on reality. Maybe you need to see Dr. Evans again. Your anxiety is spiraling." He turned the table so fast I felt dizzy. He made me apologize. I actually apologized to him for finding proof of his betrayal. That is the power Marcus holds. He can twist the sky into the ground until you don't know which way is up. But the reality of Valerie Cross hit me with the force of a freight train at the Sterling Solutions quarterly launch party last night. I insisted on going. Despite Marcus's objections, I wore a vintage emerald green gown that used to make him look at me with desire. Last night, he barely acknowledged my presence, and then, there she was. Valerie. She was stunning. I had to give her that. She wore a red dress that was cut dangerously low, a splash of crimson in a sea of black tuxedos. She stood by Marcus's side, handing him documents, laughing at his jokes, touching his forearm with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just professional, it was possessive. She saw me watching them. Instead of looking away, she held my gaze. She smiled, a sharp, predatory little thing that didn't reach her eyes. Later in the evening, when I was standing alone by the champagne tower, she approached me. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, her voice sugary sweet but laced with venom. "It is so lovely to finally see you out and about. Marcus mentions you often. He says you enjoy the quiet life." She paused, taking a sip of her drink, her eyes scanning my face as if searching for wrinkles. "It must be nice to be retired, to not have to worry about the speed at which the world is moving. Marcus and I were just saying how exhausting it is to be at the forefront of everything, but I suppose someone has to build the future, right? The insult was wrapped in so much velvet I almost missed the blade. She wasn't just calling me old or irrelevant, she was marking her territory. She was telling me that she was the future, and I was a relic of the past. I left the party early, claiming a migraine. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I drove home in the rain, the windshield wipers slashing back and forth like a metronome counting down the moments of my marriage. When I got back to the penthouse, the silence was deafening. I went straight to the safe in my dressing room, where I kept my personal laptop, the one device Marcus hadn't synced to the main server. I needed to see the damage. I logged into my personal savings account, the one I had kept separate since the sale of my parents' house. The money I had slowly built back up through freelance consulting in the early years. I stared at the screen, and the air left my lungs. The balance should have been over $500,000. It was now sitting at less than $50,000. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Pulling up the transaction history, there were dozens of withdrawals over the last 6 months. Asset management fee, portfolio diversification transfer, Sterling Trust advisory. They were all authorized by a digital signature that looked exactly like mine. Marcus. He had used the power of attorney I had granted him for a specific real estate deal 3 years ago and never revoked. He was draining me dry. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was erasing me. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my pale face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the laptop through the floor-to-ceiling window and watch it shatter on the pavement below. I wanted to storm into the bedroom when he came home and demand my money, my life, my dignity back. But then, I looked at the rain streaking the glass. I thought about the smart home system that locked the doors at his command. I thought about the way he had looked at me when he called me hysterical. If I confronted him now, with nothing but my anger, he would destroy me. He would paint me as the crazy, jealous wife. He would cut me off completely. I was in a cage, and the lock was controlled by his voice. I closed the laptop slowly. I wiped my tears. I stood up and walked to the window. Placing my hand against the cold glass, I would not scream. I would not fight him tonight. I would go back to being the perfect, silent ornament. I would let him think he had won. I would let him think I was the foolish, retired wife who stayed home and arranged flowers while he built the future with his mistress. I would watch. I would wait, because Marcus Sterling might be a genius, but he is arrogant, and arrogant men make mistakes. He thinks I am weak because I have been quiet. He has forgotten that before I was his wife, I was the architect who designed the very foundation he stands on. I turned away from the window and walked into the bedroom. Slipping into the cold sheets of our marital bed, I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as the smart lights dimmed automatically to sleep mode. He thought he was turning off the lights on my world. He didn't realize he was just helping me hide in the dark, where I could see him clearly, but he could no longer see me. The game had changed. He wanted a war. He would get one, but the first battle would be fought in silence. The suffocation did not happen all at once. It was a slow, deliberate tightening of a noose I had not realized was around my neck until my feet were already dangling off the ground. It began with the whispers. I would walk into a room, perhaps a dinner party or a gallery opening, and the conversation would die instantly, replaced by pitying smiles and overly loud greetings. I saw the way the wives of Marcus's business partners looked at me, scanning my face for signs of cracks. I found out later what Marcus had been planting in their minds. He told them I was fragile. He told them I was unraveling under the pressure of a midlife crisis. He told them I was mixing wine with Xanax just to get through the day. The terrifying part was that he almost made it true. Every morning, Marcus would set out a small glass dish with my supplements. "For your energy, darling," he would say, kissing my forehead. "You look so pale lately." I took them because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the lethargy dragging at my limbs was just stress. But within 20 minutes of swallowing those pills, a heavy gray fog would descend over my brain. I started dropping things. I forgot names of people I had known for years. At a charity auction, I tripped over my own feet and shattered a crystal flute. The room went silent. I looked up to see Marcus rushing to my side, his face a mask of performative concern. "It is all right, everyone," he announced, his voice smooth and commanding. "She is just a little tired. We will get her home." He played the saint, and I was the unstable burden he had to carry. Then came the blue lights. It was a Tuesday night. I was driving my G-Wagon home from a late meeting with a landscape client, one of the few who had not dropped me yet. I was sober. I was careful. But as I turned onto the highway, the siren wailed behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled over, hands on the wheel. The officer asked to search the car. I consented immediately because I had nothing to hide. I stood on the side of the road, shivering in the cold drizzle, watching the officer rummage through the trunk. He lifted the spare tire cover and pulled out a clear plastic bag filled with white powder. My world tilted. "That is not mine," I gasped, my voice barely a squeak. "I have never seen that before." The officer did not care. I was handcuffed, the cold metal biting into my wrists, and shoved into the back of the cruiser. I did not call a lawyer. I called Marcus. He arrived at the station within an hour, flanked by the company's lead attorney, a shark named Richard. They got me out on bail before the sun came up, but the damage was done. "We managed to keep it out of the press for now," Marcus said as he drove me home, his eyes fixed on the road. "But the charges are serious. Avery, possession with intent to distribute. My God, how could you be so careless?" "I didn't do it," I screamed, the fog in my brain clearing for a moment under the adrenaline. "Someone put that there." "Who?" "Avery," he snapped. "Who would frame you? You are paranoid. You are sick. And now you are a liability." The next morning, he placed a stack of documents on the kitchen island. "Power of attorney," the header read. "Sign it," Marcus said, pushing a pen toward me. "Richard says it is the only way to protect our assets if the prosecution goes after you. If you go to prison, the state could freeze everything. This lets me manage the accounts, keep the house running, and pay for your defense." I looked at the paper, then at him. The man I had married, the man I had built up from nothing, was looking at me with the cold calculation of a reptile. "No," I said. Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I am not signing over my rights to you. I will fight this charge myself." He did not yell. He just picked up the papers, slid them into his briefcase, and walked out. Have it your way. 2 hours later, I went to the grocery store to buy milk. My credit card was declined. I tried another. Declined. I tried my debit card. Card reported lost or stolen. The terminal beeped. I logged into my banking app on my phone. Access denied. Contact administrator. I stood in the middle of the aisle, humiliated, while a line of impatient shoppers glared at me. I left the groceries and ran to my car. I called my private lawyer, James, a man I had known since college. He had handled the sale of my parents' house. He was supposed to be on my side. "James, Marcus has locked me out of everything." I cried into the phone. "You need to file an emergency injunction. He is trying to starve me out." There was a long pause on the other line. "Avery," James said, his voice sounding strange, strained. "I think you should listen to Marcus. He called me this morning. He explained the situation with your substance issues. We agreed that for your own safety, he should handle the finances for a while." "He bought you," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "How much did he pay you? James, was it worth my life?" James hung up. I was alone, totally and completely alone. I drove back to the penthouse, my mind racing. I needed leverage. I needed to know what his endgame was. I remembered the hidden safe in the guest bedroom closet. The one he thought I didn't know the combination to. It was his birthday simple, arrogant. I waited until I heard the shower running in the master bath. Then I slipped into the guest room. I opened the safe. Inside, There was a folder labeled Project Horizon. I flipped through the pages, my eyes widening with every line. It was a term sheet, a sale agreement. Marcus was in the final stages of selling Sterling Solutions to a conglomerate in Dubai for $50 million. But it was the appendix that made my blood run cold. There was a wire transfer schedule. 100% of the proceeds were to be routed to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. He wasn't just leaving me. He was liquidating our entire life, taking the money I had helped him earn, and vanishing. I heard the shower stop. I shoved the papers back, but my hand knocked over a small sculpture on the shelf. It crashed to the floor. "Avery!" Marcus's voice boomed from the hallway. I froze. He appeared in the doorway, a towel wrapped around his waist, water dripping from his hair. He looked at the open safe. He looked at the shattered sculpture. And then he looked at me. The mask finally fell away completely. There was no more concern, no more pity, only pure, unadulterated loathing. "You are a persistent little pest, aren't you?" he sneered. Walking into the room, "You are selling the company," I said, backing away until I hit the wall. "You are stealing everything, $50 million. You are going to leave me with nothing." "I am leaving you with exactly what you deserve," he spat. "I carried you for 10 years. Avery, you and your pathetic little dinners and your boring stories. I am suffocating. I want to live, and I'm not going to let you drag me down with your mediocrity. I made you," I yelled, the anger finally overriding the fear. "I sold my parents' home for you. You were nothing but a broke coder in a cheap apartment until I believed in you. And now I am a king," he roared. "And kings don't stay married to the peasants who knew them when they were poor." He stepped closer, invading my space. "Valerie understands me. She has fire. She has ambition. And she is giving me the one thing you never could." He leaned down, whispering the words into my ear like a poison. "She is pregnant. Avery, it is a boy, my son, my heir." The world stopped spinning. It wasn't the affair. It wasn't the money. It was that we had tried for years. The doctors said it was unexplained. I had cried myself to sleep 1,000 nights over empty cribs. And now, he was replacing me in the most primal way possible. "Get out," I whispered. "Get out of my house." Marcus laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Your house, Avery. Look around you." I turned to run. I needed to leave. I needed air. I ran to the front door and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't turn. The electronic lock was engaged. I pounded on the panel. "Open." "Sterling home," Marcus said calmly from the living room. "Lockdown mode. Authorization Alpha 1. Red lights pulsed along the baseboards. The heavy steel shutters on the windows began to descend, blocking out the gray Seattle sky. I ran to the terrace door, locked. I ran to the service elevator, locked. "You can't do this," I screamed, pounding on the glass. "This is false imprisonment." "No," Marcus said, pouring himself a drink. "This is a protective measure for a danger to herself and others." The doorbell rang. It wasn't a guest. It was a sharp, authoritative buzz. Marcus tapped a button on his phone. The front door clicked open. 3 men walked in. They were dressed in white scrubs, carrying a black medical bag. They were not police. They were private contractors, big men with dead eyes. "She is having an episode," Marcus said, gesturing to me where I stood trembling by the door. "She is delusional, violent. She thinks I'm stealing her money. She thinks the house is attacking her." "No," I shouted, backing away. "He is lying. He is selling the company. Call the police." The lead man stepped forward. "Mrs. Sterling, please calm down. We are here to help you. Don't touch me." I grabbed a heavy vase from the console table and swung it, but the man was faster. He caught my arm, twisting it behind my back with practiced ease. I cried out in pain. The vase shattered on the floor. "Restraints," the man said. "Marcus," I screamed, looking at my husband. He was standing by the window, sipping his scotch, watching me struggle like I was a bug trapped in a jar. "Marcus, please don't do this." He didn't even blink. "Take her to Serenity Pines. Doctor, Samuel is expecting her. Make sure she is sedated for the transport. I don't want her making a scene in the lobby. I felt the prick of a needle in my neck. Cold fire spread through my veins. My legs gave out. The room began to swim. The last thing I saw was Marcus turning his back on me to look at his reflection in the dark window, straightening his tie. "Goodbye, Avery," he said softly. Then the darkness took me. Serenity Pines was not a hospital. It was a storage facility for human liabilities, wrapped in the aesthetic of a 5-star wellness retreat. The walls were painted a calming shade of sage green, and the air was perpetually scented with lavender and deception. To the outside world, it was where the exhausted elite went to recharge their spirits. To those of us inside, it was a velvet-lined coffin. My room had a view of the pine forest, but the windows were made of reinforced plexiglass that did not open. The door had no lock on the inside, only a heavy magnetic seal on the outside that clicked shut with a sound that haunted my nightmares. Time became a fluid, meaningless concept. I had been there for 3 weeks, or perhaps a month. My phone, my watch, and even my wedding ring had been confiscated upon arrival. Logged into a plastic bin by a nurse with a smile that did not reach her eyes. The daily routine was designed to break the will. Morning yoga at 7, group therapy at 9, where we were encouraged to admit our delusions, and then the medication line at noon. The pills were small and pale yellow. They called them mood stabilizers. I called them chemical lobotomies. For the first week, I swallowed them obediently, too in shock to fight back. They made the world soft and fuzzy. They made the rage inside me feel distant, like a radio playing in another room. I spent hours sitting in the solarium, staring at a single fern, unable to form a complex thought. That was exactly what Marcus wanted. He did not need me dead. That would raise questions. He needed me pliable. He needed me erased. He came to visit me on a Tuesday. I knew it was Tuesday, only because the cafeteria served roast chicken that day. I was escorted into a private meeting room by 2 orderlies who gripped my elbows a little too tightly. Marcus sat at a glass table, looking immaculate in a charcoal suit. He smelled of rain and sandalwood, the scent of the life I had lost. "You look rested, Avery," he said, not standing up. I sat across from him. The drugs were still in my system, making my tongue feel heavy. "Why am I still here, Marcus?" He slid a manila envelope across the table. "Doctor, Samuel says you are making progress, but you are not ready to come home. In fact, he suggests a long-term residency, for your own safety." I looked at the envelope. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Irreconcilable differences, given your condition, and the criminal charges pending against you for the drugs found in the car. My lawyers have drafted a settlement. It is generous, considering." I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. It was not generous. It was a slaughter. I would receive a small monthly stipend, contingent on my remaining in a care facility approved by him. I waived all rights to Sterling Solutions. I waived all claims to our marital assets. "I sold the G-Wagon yesterday," he added casually, as if mentioning the weather. "And I liquidated the joint savings to cover your medical bills here. This place is not cheap. Avery, $2,000 a night. You are burning through your equity fast." "You stole my money," I whispered, fighting through the fog. "You stole everything." "I am managing resources," he corrected, checking his watch. "Sign the papers. Avery, if you do, I might be able to convince the district attorney to drop the drug charges. If you don't, well, prison is much less comfortable than Serenity Pines." He uncapped a fountain pen, a Mont Blanc I had bought him for our 5th anniversary, and placed it on the paper. I looked at his hand. Smooth, manicured. The hand of a man who had never done a day of physical labor in his life since I pulled him out of poverty. Something inside me snapped. It was a small snap, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest, but it was enough to wake me up. "I need time to read it," I said, forcing my voice to sound trembling and weak. My head. It hurts so much. Marcus sighed, visibly annoyed. Fine. You have until my next visit. Don't disappoint me. Avery. He left without looking back. That night, I started the war. The next day at the medication line, I played the part of the broken doll perfectly. I shuffled my feet. I kept my head down. When the nurse handed me the paper cup with the yellow pill, I tossed it into my mouth and took a big gulp of water. But I didn't swallow. I wedged the pill under my tongue, deep in the soft pocket of flesh. I opened my mouth for the mandatory check. Lifting my tongue just enough to hide the tablet, the nurse, bored and overworked, glanced in and nodded. "Good girl," she said. I walked to the nearest bathroom, locked the stall, and spat the bitter pill into the toilet. I flushed it away. It took 3 days for the fog to clear completely. When it did, the clarity was agonizing. The grief hit me like a physical blow, but I welcomed it. Grief was real. Anger was real. I began to observe. I memorized the shift changes of the guards. I noted that the delivery trucks came through the back gate at 4 in the morning on Mondays and Thursdays. I saw that the cameras in the garden had a blind spot behind the old oak tree near the maintenance shed. That was where I met Elias. I was sitting on a bench in the garden, pretending to read a magazine but actually watching the perimeter fence. A man in a gray jumpsuit was sweeping leaves nearby. He was tall, gaunt, with graying hair that looked like it had once been thick and dark. He moved with a stiff, angry rhythm. He swept closer to my bench. I looked up. Our eyes met. He froze. His grip on the broom tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Mrs. Sterling," he rasped. His voice was rough, unused. I squinted. There was something familiar about his eyes, intelligent, sharp, completely out of place on a janitor. Then I remembered. 5 years ago, the IT department Christmas party, the brilliant lead developer who had argued with Marcus about data privacy ethics. "Elias," I whispered. "Elias Thorne." He sneered, spitting on the ground near my expensive loafers. "I see he finally discarded you too." I wondered when it would happen. "What are you doing here?" I asked, ignoring his hostility. "Surviving," he said bitterly. "After Marcus fired me for corporate espionage, which we both know was a lie to cover up his own data theft, he blacklisted me. No tech firm in Seattle would touch me. I lost my house. I lost my wife. This was the only job I could get where they didn't run a deep background check, scrubbing toilets in a prison for rich people." He looked at me with pure loathing. "Is he paying you to spy on the staff now, or are you just here to mock me?" "He locked me in here," I said, my voice steady. "He framed me for drug possession. He stole my savings. He is selling the company and running off with his assistant. I am not his spy. Elias, I am his victim." Elias paused. He studied my face. He looked at the dark circles under my eyes, the tremble in my hands that wasn't from fear, but from the withdrawal of the sedatives. He saw the hatred burning there, a hatred that matched his own. "He took my code," Elias said softly, "the core algorithm for Sterling Solutions. That was mine. He patented it under his name while I was on vacation." "I know," I lied. "I didn't know, but I needed him. And I know where the proof is." Elias dropped the broom. He took a step closer, checking the camera angle. "What proof?" "There is a contract," I said, leaning in. "A founder's agreement he signed 7 years ago. It gives me controlling interest. It gives me the power to destroy him, but I can't get to it. I am trapped in here." Elias was silent for a long moment. Then, a slow, dark smile touched his lips. "If you can destroy him," he murmured, "then I am your man." Over the next week, we met in the blind spot every afternoon. We spoke in hushed whispers. Elias told me about the security protocols. The magnetic locks were hardwired, but the backup generator had a flaw he had noticed because he used to design systems like this. "I can trip the breakers," he whispered on a Wednesday, "but only for 3 minutes before the auxiliary kicks in. You have to be ready." "I need a phone," I said. "I need to check if the contract is safe." The next day, he slipped a heavy battered Nokia into my hand along with a crumpled napkin. Burner, prepaid, don't get caught. That night, huddled under my duvet with the phone screen dimmed to the lowest setting, I dialed the number of the small bank in Chinatown where I kept my secret safety deposit box. It was an automated system. Please enter your box number. I typed it in. Last access, 7 years ago. I let out a breath I'd been holding for days. He hadn't found it. Marcus had turned the penthouse upside down, hacked my accounts, and interrogated my friends. But he had forgotten about the little bank next to the noodle shop where we used to eat when we were poor. The contract was safe. The escape was set for Thursday night. A storm was rolling in off the Pacific, a classic Washington deluge that would mask the noise and chaos. I sat on the edge of my bed, fully dressed in the dark clothes I had stolen from the laundry cart, a pair of oversized scrub pants and a black hoodie. The rain lashed against the plexiglass like bullets. Thunder rattled the floorboards. My heart was a drum in my chest, beating a frantic rhythm. At 2 a.m, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then total darkness. The hum of the magnetic lock on my door died. I didn't hesitate. I pushed the door open and sprinted into the hallway. The emergency red lights bathed the corridor in the color of blood. I could hear shouting from the nurses' station, confused voices calling for maintenance. I ran toward the service exit at the end of the east wing. Elias had left it unlatched. I burst out into the storm. The cold rain hit me instantly, soaking me to the bone. But it felt like baptism. It felt like freedom. "Over here!" a voice hissed from the shadows. Elias was crouching behind a dumpster. "The truck is coming. 2 minutes." We waited, shivering in the mud. The massive garbage truck rumbled up the drive, its headlights cutting through the rain. It stopped at the loading dock to pick up the medical waste bins. "Go!" Elias shouted over the roar of the engine and the thunder. "Jump in the back when he lifts the bin." It was madness. It was suicide. But the alternative was Marcus winning. I ran. I scrambled up the slippery metal side of the truck just as the hydraulic arm lifted a dumpster. I threw myself into the cavernous back of the truck, landing on a pile of black plastic bags that smelled of rot and chemicals. Elias landed right beside me. "Get down," he yelled. We buried ourselves under the bags of trash just as the compactor groaned to life. The metal wall began to move toward us. A slow, crushing force. "Stay flat," Elias screamed. I pressed my face into a bag of what smelled like cafeteria leftovers, praying to a god I hadn't spoken to in years. The compactor blade stopped 2 feet from our heads. The truck lurched forward. We were moving. I lay there in the darkness, covered in filth, shaking uncontrollably. I had been a socialite. I had been a respected architect. I had been the wife of a CEO. Now, I was garbage. But as the truck picked up speed, distancing me from Serenity Pines, I started to laugh. It was a wild, hysterical sound that got lost in the noise of the storm. Marcus had taken my car. He had taken my money. He had taken my dignity. But he had failed to keep me in the cage. And now, the tiger was loose. The stench was the first thing that hit me. A thick, suffocating wall of rotting food, medical waste, and wet cardboard. Then came the sensation of motion sickness as the garbage truck lurched over a pothole. I was buried waist-deep in a black plastic bag that had split open, spilling coffee grounds and what looked like surgical gauze all over my legs. When the truck finally slowed to a halt at a red light on the outskirts of the industrial district, I didn't hesitate. I scrambled over the mountain of refuse, my fingernails digging into the slime-coated metal sides, and vaulted over the edge. I hit the asphalt hard, rolling to absorb the impact. The pain in my shoulder was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I scrambled into the drainage ditch by the side of the road, just as the truck roared back to life and sped away, carrying the last remnants of Avery Sterling, the trophy wife. The victim to the landfill, I stood up, gasping for air. I was covered in filth. My hair, once my pride, was matted with grease. My expensive cashmere sweater was ruined, stained with God knows what. I leaned over and retched. emptying my stomach until there was nothing left but bile. I wiped my mouth with the back of a shaking hand. I looked down at my reflection in a puddle. I looked like a monster. Good. Monsters are scary. Monsters fight back. I walked. I kept to the shadows, avoiding the streetlights that buzzed overhead like accusing eyes. It was 10 miles to the rendezvous point Elias and I had whispered about in the garden, a dilapidated motel called the Rusty Anchor, located on a forgotten stretch of highway just outside Portland. My feet bled inside my loafers. The cold wind bit through my wet clothes. But with every step, the fire in my chest burned hotter. Marcus had taken my comfort, but he had given me back my rage. When I finally reached the motel, room number 4 was dark. I knocked 3 times, a specific rhythm. The door cracked open, and Elias pulled me inside. "Jesus," he breathed, staring at me. "You look like hell." "I feel like it," I rasped. He handed me a bundle of clothes, cheap jeans, a flannel shirt, and a pair of worn work boots. "Shower, quick, then we talk." I stood under the scalding water for 20 minutes, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. I watched the grime swirl down the drain, imagining it was Marcus's touch washing away. When I stepped out, dressed in the oversized clothes, Elias was sitting on the edge of the bed, pacing nervously. He had a laptop open, an old, bulky model that looked like a relic. "I checked the news," he said, turning the screen toward me. There was Marcus, standing in front of a bank of microphones, looking devastated. The caption read, "Tech CEO pleads for troubled wife's return." "Avery is suffering from a severe psychotic break," Marcus was saying, wiping a fake tear from his eye. "She is dangerous to herself and others. We are offering a reward of $50,000 for any information leading to her safe return." "50,000, Elias scoffed. "He really wants you back in that cage." "He is terrified," I corrected, sitting down on the frayed carpet. "He knows what I know." Elias looked at me. "You mentioned a contract. Is it real, Avery, or is it just something you remember?" "It is real," I said, my voice steady. 7 years ago, Sterling Solutions was dead in the water. Marcus had burned through his initial funding. He had no product, just a prototype. He begged me to sell my parents' estate. It was prime real estate in San Francisco. I sold it for $650,000. "I remember," Elias said. "That was the month we finally got the servers running." "Before I handed him the check," I continued, "I made him sign a document. It wasn't a loan agreement. It was a mortgage of intellectual property and founders' equity. I drafted it myself, using a template from my father's old business partner who was a contract lawyer. It states that in exchange for the capital, I hold a lien on 60% of the founders' shares. And here's the kicker: the shares are held in a trust under my mother's maiden name, Mary Vance. The contract also grants the trust holder me absolute veto power over any merger or acquisition." Elias's jaw dropped. "He signed away control of his own company." "He was desperate," I said, "and he was arrogant. He thought he could talk me into shredding it once we made it big. He thought I was just a naive girl in love. He forgot about it because for 7 years, I played the part of the submissive wife. I never brought it up. I let him think he was the king." "And the document?" Elias asked, leaning forward. "The original is in a safety deposit box at the First Union Bank in Seattle's Chinatown," I said. "Box number 402. I am the only one with the key, and I am the only one with the biometric access code." Elias ran a hand through his gray hair. "Seattle is 200 miles north, and right now, every cop, private investigator, and bounty hunter in the state is looking for a blonde woman with a mental illness." I stood up and walked to the bathroom mirror. I picked up the pair of rusty kitchen scissors Elias had left on the sink. "Then the blonde woman has to die," I said. We walked 3 miles to a salvage yard Elias knew about. It was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered glass. The fence was high, but the lock was rusty. I picked it in 30 seconds with a bobby pin. Inside, the rows of dead cars stretched out like skeletons. I found what I was looking for near the back, a 1998 sedan, faded blue, with a dented fender. It was old enough to lack a tracking system, but new enough to probably still run. I popped the hood. The battery was dead, but there was a fresher one in a wrecked truck nearby. "Hold the flashlight," I ordered Elias. My hands moved with a memory that surprised me. I swapped the battery. I stripped the wires under the steering column, red to red, black to ground. I touched the ignition wires together. Sparks flew. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life with a noisy, smoky idle. "You are full of surprises," Elias shouted over the noise. "Get in," I yelled back. "We have a long drive." The journey north was a nightmare of paranoia. We stayed off the interstate, sticking to the winding back roads that snaked through the dense forests of Washington. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror made my heart hammer. Every time a car slowed down near us, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Elias monitored the police scanner on his laptop, using a cracked Wi-Fi signal he was stealing from passing houses. "They have set up roadblocks on I-5, he warned. "They are checking IDs. Marcus must have pulled strings with the governor or something. He is claiming you are a kidnapping risk." "He is trying to box us in," I said, my eyes scanning the dark road. "He knows I will head for Seattle. He just doesn't know why." We drove in silence for 3 hours. The gas gauge was hovering near empty. "We have to stop," Elias said. "We won't make the next town." I pulled into a lonely gas station that looked like a relic from the 50s. The fluorescent lights buzzed angrily. I pulled the cap of my hoodie low over my face. "I will pump," I said. "You stay down. If anyone sees you, they might link you to me." I stepped out into the cool night air, the smell of gasoline mixed with the scent of pine. I grabbed the nozzle and started filling the tank. My hand was shaking. I forced myself to breathe. A black SUV pulled in at the pump opposite mine. It was sleek, expensive, and completely out of place at this rundown station. The window rolled down. A man in a tan trench coat sat behind the wheel. He wasn't looking at the pump. He was looking at his phone. Then he looked up at me. I froze. It was the man from the party the private investigator Marcus used for his dirty work. He didn't recognize me immediately. The black hair threw him off, but then his eyes narrowed. He looked back at his phone, then at me again. He opened his car door. "Hey," he called out, his voice casual but carrying a dangerous edge. "Excuse me, miss, you look familiar." I didn't answer. I yanked the nozzle out of the car, spraying gasoline over the side of the sedan. "Go!" I screamed, jumping into the driver's seat. Elias was already sitting up. "What? It is him!" I slammed the car into drive and stomped on the gas pedal. The old tires screeched against the pavement. The investigator lunged for my door handle, his fingers brushing the metal. But I swerved hard to the left. Forcing him to jump back, the sedan fishtailed onto the main road. In the rearview mirror, I saw the SUV peeling out of the station, its headlights blindingly bright. "He is following us," Elias shouted, looking back. "That is a V8 engine. Avery, we can't outrun him in this junk heap." "We don't have to outrun him," I said, gripping the wheel. "We just have to lose him." The road ahead twisted through a dense patch of forest. I killed the headlights. "Are you crazy?" Elias yelled. "You can't see." "I don't need to see," I said through gritted teeth. "I need to disappear." I drove into the pitch black, guided only by the faint moonlight filtering through the trees and the terrifying adrenaline of a woman who had nothing left to lose. The SUV's lights swept over us, blinding and close, then fell back as I took a sharp turn onto a gravel logging road I had spotted at the last second. The sedan bottomed out, scraping metal against rock. But I didn't lift my foot. We bounced and skidded deep into the darkness, leaving the paved road and the monster chasing us behind. We abandoned the blue sedan 3 miles outside the city limits, wiping down the steering wheel and door handles with a rag soaked in rubbing alcohol to kill any DNA evidence. We entered Seattle not as a conquering army, but as shadows, slipping into the gray veins of the metropolis under the cover of a pre-dawn fog. The city felt different from down here. From the penthouse, Seattle was a tapestry of lights and steel. From the street level, it was a maze of wet concrete, exhaust fumes, and indifference. I led Elias to the Pioneer Square district, to a derelict brick building that had once been a textile factory. 5 years ago, my architectural firm had surveyed it for a potential loft conversion project that fell through due to zoning issues. I knew the basement had a secondary access tunnel that opened into the old subway maintenance lines, a detail that wasn't on the public blueprints. We broke the rusted padlock on the side door and descended into the dark. The air down there was thick with the smell of mold and damp earth, but it was dry, and more importantly, it was invisible to Marcus's digital eye. "This is our command center," Elias asked, kicking aside a pile of rotting wood to set up his laptop on an old crate. "It is off the grid," I said, wringing out the hem of my oversized flannel shirt. "And the walls are thick enough to block thermal scanners if they get desperate." We spent the first 12 hours in a state of high-tension paralysis. Elias worked his magic, his fingers flying across the keyboard of the battered laptop, tapping into the city's unsecure Wi-Fi networks to build a digital perimeter. I paced the length of the basement, my mind replaying the layout of the First Union Bank in Chinatown. It was a small community branch. Nothing like the glass and steel fortresses Marcus preferred. That was why I had chosen it 7 years ago. It felt human. It felt safe. "I am in," Elias said suddenly, his voice echoing in the empty space. "I have tapped into the bank's external security feed." I rushed over to look at the grainy footage on the screen. My heart sank. 2 men in plain clothes were standing across the street from the bank entrance, pretending to read newspapers. They were not subtle. They were big, broad-shouldered, and wearing earpieces. "Private security," I murmured. "Marcus has put a watch on every financial institution I have ever touched." "And look at the timestamp," Elias pointed out. "They are rotating shifts every 4 hours. They are not taking any chances. Avery, if you walk within 50 feet of that door, they will tackle you before you can even touch the handle." "We don't have time to wait them out," I said, frustration gnawing at my gut. "We need that contract." "It gets worse," Elias said, opening a new window. I hacked into Marcus's calendar. He is not just selling the company, he is rushing the closing. The signing ceremony with the Dubai conglomerate is scheduled for this Friday at 6 p.m. That is 3 days from now. 3 days. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. If Marcus signed those papers and the funds were transferred, my contract would become a piece of paper fighting against $1 billion in offshore accounts. I would be suing a ghost. I needed to stop the sale, and to do that, I needed the original document with his wet signature. "We can't sneak past them," I said, pacing again, "and we can't fight them, so we have to move them." Elias looked up, an eyebrow raised. "Move them? How?" "Marcus is paranoid," I explained, the plan forming rapidly in my mind. "He is terrified that I'm going to surface and ruin his image before the sale. He's reacting to every shadow. So, let's give him a shadow to chase." I looked at Elias. "Can you spoof a location, make it look like I am somewhere else?" A slow grin spread across Elias's tired face. "I can do better than that. I can make it look like you are fleeing the country." We spent the next 6 hours crafting the perfect lie. Elias created a digital footprint that was clumsy enough to be found, but realistic enough to be believed. He hacked into the airline reservation system, a backdoor he had kept from his days testing firewalls, and booked a one-way ticket to Mexico City under the name Mary Vance, my mother's maiden name. It was the name on the trust. Marcus would recognize it immediately. Then, Elias accessed a localized social media group for airport spotters and planted a tip using a burner account. "Just saw the wife of that tech CEO looking frantic at SeaTac Airport. She is wearing a wig and trying to hide." We waited. The tension in the basement was palpable. I sat on the cold concrete floor, knees pulled to my chest, watching the police scanner application Elias had running. At 2 in the afternoon, the radio crackled to life. Dispatch, we have a credible sighting of the subject at SeaTac International. Terminal A, suspect is attempting to board Flight 492 to Mexico. All units, converge on the airport. Repeat, all units to the airport. Private security is already en route. I looked at the bank's security feed on the laptop. On the screen, the two men standing guard touched their earpieces simultaneously. They exchanged a few words, nodded, and then ran toward a black SUV parked down the block. Within 30 seconds, the street in front of the bank was empty. They took the bait, Elias breathed. You have a window, maybe 20 minutes before they realize it is a ghost flight. That is all I need, I said. Standing up, I pulled on a gray maintenance jumpsuit we had scavenged from a janitor's closet in the building. It smelled of stale bleach and sweat, but it covered my clothes perfectly. I pulled a low baseball cap over my dyed black hair and grabbed a mop bucket Elias had found. Stay on the comms, I told him, tapping the earpiece of the burner phone hidden under my hair. If you see them coming back, you buzz me twice. I emerged from the alleyway and merged into the bustling crowd of Chinatown. The neighborhood was alive with the smell of roasting duck and steaming dim sum. Tourists and locals moved in a chaotic river of noise and color. I kept my head down, pushing the mop bucket on its squeaky wheels, adopting the posture of someone invisible, shoulders slumped, gaze fixed on the pavement. I was just another worker in a city that ignored its workers. The First Union Bank stood on the corner, a modest brick building with gold lettering peeling slightly above the door. I pushed through the glass doors, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The air conditioning hit me, cool and sterile. The lobby was quiet. A security guard, an older man, not one of Marcus's goons, glanced at me. "Restroom is in the back," he grunted, assuming I was there to clean. "Thank you," I mumbled, keeping my voice rough. I wheeled the bucket toward the back, but instead of turning to the restroom, I slipped down the narrow corridor that led to the safety deposit vault. I knew the layout. I had studied it. There was a gatekeeper, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Liu, who had worked here for 20 years. I prayed she was on duty. She was. She sat behind the metal desk, reading a Chinese newspaper. She looked up as I approached, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. "Maintenance is Tuesday," she said sharply. I stopped. I lifted my head and took off the cap. I looked her straight in the eye. "Mrs. Liu," I said softly. "It is me, Avery." She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stared at my black hair, my pale face, the rough clothes. She didn't see the glamorous Mrs. Sterling anymore. She saw the young woman who used to come in with her mother to deposit small checks from the bakery they owned. "Miss Avery," she whispered, "the news. They say you are sick. They say you ran away." "They are lying," I said, my voice trembling with urgency. "Please, I need to get into box 402. My life depends on it." She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the panic button under her desk. I held my breath. If she pressed it, it was over. Then, slowly, she reached into her drawer and pulled out the master key. She stood up and unlocked the steel gate. "You have 5 minutes," she whispered. "My manager comes back from lunch then." "Thank you," I breathed. I rushed into the vault, the smell of dust and old paper filling my lungs. I found box 402. I inserted my key. Mrs. Liu inserted hers. And I turned the lock. The long metal drawer slid out. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. There it was, a single, yellowing envelope, and next to it, a silver USB drive. I opened the envelope. The mortgage of intellectual property document was inside. The ink of Marcus's signature still dark and bold. He had signed it with a flourish, confident that he would never have to honor it. I ran my thumb over the paper. This was my sword. I grabbed the USB drive. This contained the proof of the tax evasion schemes he had used in the early days, leverage I had kept just in case. I shoved both items into the deep pocket of my jumpsuit, zipped it shut, and closed the box. "Go," Mrs. Liu said from the doorway. Hurry! I squeezed her hand as I passed. I will never forget this. I pulled the cap back down and grabbed my mop bucket. I walked out of the vault, through the lobby, and back out into the bright sunlight of the street. I was trembling so hard I thought my knees would buckle. I had done it. I had the weapon. Avery, the voice was soft, incredulous, and terrifyingly familiar. I froze. The mop bucket rattled as I stopped. I turned my head slowly. Standing 5 feet away from me, holding a cup of bubble tea, was Valerie. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored trousers. She wasn't looking for me. She was just there, living her stolen life, perhaps grabbing a drink while waiting for Marcus. Her eyes were wide, staring at my face under the brim of the dirty cap. She recognized me. Not the clothes, not the hair, but the eyes. For a second, the world stopped. The noise of the traffic faded. It was just me and the woman who was carrying my husband's child, the woman who had helped him destroy me. She opened her mouth to scream. I saw her intake of breath. She was going to yell for the police. She was going to yell for the security detail that was likely speeding back from the airport right now. I didn't run. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us in a single, aggressive stride. I grabbed her wrist, my grip like iron. The bubble tea fell from her other hand, splashing onto her expensive shoes. Don't, I hissed, my voice low and lethal. Valerie flinched, her eyes darting around for help, but I twisted her wrist, forcing her to look at me. You think you won, I whispered, staring deep into her terrified pupils. You think you are the queen because you are carrying his heir. But let me tell you something, Valerie, Marcus doesn't love you. He loves what you give him. And when you become a liability, and believe me, you are about to become a massive liability, he will discard you faster than he discarded me. He said you were crazy, she stammered, her voice shaking. I am not crazy, I said, leaning closer until my lips were inches from her ear. I am the owner of the company you think you are marrying into. I have the contract, Valerie. I have everything. And unless you want to go down with him for fraud and conspiracy, you are going to turn around, walk away, and forget you ever saw me. Why should I? She challenged, though her voice lacked conviction. Because, I said, releasing her wrist with a shove, when the ship sinks, the rats are the first to drown. Do you want to be a rat, or do you want to survive? I held her gaze for one more second, letting her see the absolute certainty of his destruction in my eyes. Then, I turned and sprinted into the crowd. Diving into the chaos of the market, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew she hadn't screamed. I had planted the seed of doubt. Marcus had built his empire on lies, and I had just cracked the foundation. Elias, I said into the comms as I ducked into an alleyway, I have the package, and I think I just recruited our first witness. Get back to base. Elias's voice crackled in my ear. The police scanner is going crazy. They know the airport tip was a fake. They are turning the city upside down. I pulled the cap lower and disappeared into the shadows. Clutching the contract against my chest, the game of cat and mouse was over. Now, the hunter was about to become the hunted. We huddled around the flickering light of the laptop in our subterranean hideout, the damp cold of the basement seeping into my bones. On the wooden crate between us lay the yellowed contract, its edges curling with age. It was a beautiful piece of paper, a weapon capable of halting a $50 million transaction in its tracks. But as the adrenaline from the bank heist faded, a grim reality settled in. Elias leaned back in his rusty folding chair, rubbing his tired eyes. This stops the sale, he said, his voice grave. It proves you own the controlling interest. But Avery, it doesn't put him in handcuffs. It is a civil document. Marcus will hire an army of lawyers. He will claim he forgot, or that the contract was superseded by some verbal agreement, or that you were mentally incompetent when you enforced it. He will drag this out in court for a decade while he stays in his penthouse and you stay, well, here. He was right. I didn't just want my company back. I wanted justice. I wanted to see the look on Marcus's face when the steel bars slammed shut. I wanted him to lose not just his fortune, but his freedom. "We need proof of criminal intent," I said, staring at the contract. "We need to prove he didn't just breach a contract, but that he broke the law." Elias nodded. "The tax evasion data on that USB drive is a start, but it is messy. It is mostly shell companies and creative accounting. We need a smoking gun. We need someone who knows where the bodies are buried." I closed my eyes, searching my memory of the early days at Sterling Solutions. Before the glamour, before the lies, there were people who actually worked. "Martha Roberts," I whispered. Martha had been our head accountant for the first 5 years. She was a woman of rigid morals, the kind who color-coded her spice rack. 2 years ago, she had abruptly retired. Marcus had told me she wanted to spend more time with her grandchildren in Arizona. I had sent flowers. I never heard back. "She lives in a small bungalow in Ballard," I said, standing up and brushing the dust from my stolen jumpsuit. "If anyone knows how Marcus moved the money, it is her." "Ballard is risky," Elias warned. "It is residential, lots of ring cameras." "We don't have a choice," I said. We waited until nightfall to move. The rain had returned, a relentless Seattle drizzle that washed the city in gray. We took the battered blue sedan, parking 2 blocks away from Martha's house. The windows were dark, save for the blue flicker of a television in the living room. I walked up the path alone, pulling my hood low. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. "Martha," I called out softly. "Please, it is Avery." The curtain twitched. A moment later, the porch light flicked on, blinding me. The door opened a crack, held by a security chain. Martha stood there, looking older and frailer than I remembered. She wore a thick cardigan and held a phone in her hand, her thumb hovering over the emergency dial. "Avery?" she gasped, squinting at me. "My God, the news said... They said you were dangerous." "I am not dangerous to you, Martha," I said, stepping into the light so she could see my face, the dark. Chopped hair, the hollow cheeks, the desperation. "I am only dangerous to the man who ruined us both." She hesitated, her eyes scanning the street for police cars. Then, seeing the raw pain in my eyes, she undid the chain and pulled me inside. Her house smelled of potpourri and old paper. She sat me down on a floral sofa and made me tea, her hands shaking as she poured the hot water. "He made me leave," she said quietly, staring into her cup. "He didn't fire me. He threatened me. He said if I didn't sign the non-disclosure agreement and take the severance package, he would frame my son for embezzlement. My son works at the bank. Avery, he just started his career. I couldn't let Marcus destroy him." "What did you find?" "Martha," I asked gently, "what was he hiding?" She stood up and walked to a bookshelf filled with porcelain figurines. She moved a ceramic shepherdess and pulled out a hollowed-out book, a thick copy of War and Peace. Inside was a small, black notebook. "The digital records can be wiped," she said, handing it to me. "But I kept a manual log. I wrote down every transaction he forced me to authorize." I opened the book. The pages were filled with Martha's neat, cramped handwriting, dates, amounts, account numbers. "He wasn't just evading taxes," Martha explained, her voice trembling with indignation. "He was stealing from the employee pension fund. He set up a fake consulting firm called Apex Strategy in the Cayman Islands. Every month, he transferred 3% of the staff's retirement savings into it, labeling it as administrative fees. It is over $4 million. Avery. He stole from the janitors, the secretaries, the junior coders. He stole their futures." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just white-collar maneuvering. This was theft on a massive scale. This was prison time. Real, federal prison time. "Thank you, Martha," I said, closing the book. "This is it. This is the nail in his coffin. Be careful," she whispered, gripping my hand. "He is a monster. He has eyes everywhere." "I know," I said, but so do I. Back in the basement, Elias scanned the pages of the ledger, his eyes widening as he cross-referenced the account numbers with the banking data we had. This connects directly to the account he is using for the sale proceeds, Elias said, typing furiously. If we release this, the SEC will swarm him like locusts. We can't just dump it online, I said. It needs credibility. We need a voice that people trust. I thought of Gavin Hayes. He was an investigative journalist for the Seattle Chronicle, a man with a reputation for being a bulldog. 3 years ago, he had written an exposé on Sterling Solutions' privacy violations. Marcus had sued the paper for libel, burying them in legal fees until they were forced to retract the story and fire Gavin. He was now working as a freelancer, running a blog that exposed corporate corruption. He hated Marcus as much as I did. Find me Gavin Hayes' encrypted Dropbox, I told Elias. We spent the next hour scanning the most damning pages of the ledger and the mortgage of intellectual property contract. I wrote a short note to go with the files. The retraction was a lie. Here's the proof. The signing ceremony is the crime scene. Be there. I hit send. The digital packet vanished into the ether, on its way to the one man who would know exactly how to weaponize it. Just as we finished, Elias's laptop let out a sharp ping. A red alert flashed on the screen. Damn it, Elias hissed. What? I asked, leaning over his shoulder. He knows something is wrong, Elias said, pointing at Marcus's hacked calendar. Look, the meeting with the Dubai investors. It was scheduled for Friday. It just updated. It has been moved to tomorrow, Thursday night. My stomach dropped. Tomorrow. That is less than 24 hours. He is spooked, Elias said. The fake airport sighting bought us time, but not enough. He didn't get confirmation of your capture, and Valerie probably told him about seeing you. He wants to close the deal, get the money, and vanish before you can resurface. We have to be ready, I said, my mind racing. We have to crash that party. There is another thing, Elias said, opening a new window. I have been monitoring the internal communications of the Penthouse smart home system. Marcus is moving assets. He just transferred the deed to the Aspen vacation home, the one he promised to Valerie, into a holding company controlled solely by him. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. He is cutting ties. He is planning to leave her behind too. Does she know? Elias asked. Not yet, I said. But she is about to. I picked up the burner phone. I dialed Valerie's number, which I had memorized from the call logs I found days ago. It rang 3 times. Hello? Her voice was shaky, guarded. Valerie? I said. I didn't bother to disguise my voice. It is Avery. There was a gasp. Then silence. I could hear her breathing, rapid and shallow. Don't hang up, I said calmly. Because if you do, you will wake up next week in a very expensive apartment that you don't own, with a baby that has no father, and a boyfriend who is sipping Mai Tais on a beach where extradition treaties don't exist. You are lying, she whispered, but the doubt was already there, thick and heavy. Marcus loves me. We are a team. Are you? I asked. Ask him about the Aspen house. Valerie, ask him why the deed was transferred to Omega Holdings this morning. Ask him why his flight to Dubai tomorrow night has only 1 seat booked in first class. Stop it, she sobbed. He said you were manipulative. He said you would try to get inside my head. I am inside your head because I used to be you, I said ruthlessly. I was the woman who believed him. I was the woman who gave him everything. And look where I am. Do you really think you are special? Valerie, you are just the next host for the parasite. I let the silence stretch, letting the poison do its work. Check the flight, Valerie, I said softly. And when you realize I am right, don't scream. Just open the side door of the ballroom tomorrow night. Leave it unlocked. That is your only chance to be a witness instead of an accomplice. I hung up. I looked at Elias. He was staring at me with a mixture of awe and fear. You are terrifying, he said. I learned from the best. I replied. We had less than 24 hours. We had the evidence. We had the media. We had the seed of betrayal planted in the enemy camp. Now, we needed to look the part. I can't walk into the signing ceremony wearing a janitor's jumpsuit, I said, looking down at my filthy clothes. And you can't go as a maintenance man. If we are going to take back my company, we need to look like we own it. I have $200 left, Elias said. That won't buy a suit. No, I said. Reaching into the pocket of my jumpsuit, I pulled out a small velvet pouch I had retrieved from the safety deposit box along with the documents. Inside was a pair of diamond stud earrings heirlooms from my grandmother. They were small, understated, and worth at least $5,000. We pawn these, I said. We get you a suit, we get me a white suit, something sharp, something that screams power, and we get haircuts, real ones. Elias took the pouch, weighing it in his hand. You were saving these. I was saving them for a rainy day, I said, looking up at the water dripping from the basement ceiling. I think it is pouring, don't you? We spent the night in a frenzy of preparation. We found a 24-hour pawn shop that gave us $3,000 cash without asking questions. We found a late-night tailor who was willing to make adjustments for a rush fee. By the time the sun rose over Seattle on Thursday morning, the ghosts of the basement were gone. I stood in front of a cracked mirror in the back of the tailor shop. The black bob was styled into a sleek, sharp cut that framed my face like a helmet. The white suit fit me like armor. The fabric crisp and bright. I applied a coat of red lipstick the color of war. Elias stepped out of the changing room, in his fitted navy suit, with his hair trimmed and his beard shaved. He looked like the chief technology officer he was meant to be. He looked distinguished. He looked dangerous. Ready, he asked, adjusting his cuffs. I picked up the black leather portfolio containing the original contract and the ledger. I checked the time. 6 hours until the ceremony. 6 hours until the end of Marcus Sterling. No, I said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. I am not just ready, I am inevitable. We walked out into the city, 2 sharks swimming toward the scent of blood. The game was set. The players were in position, and Marcus Sterling had no idea that the check he was about to sign was going to bounce so hard it would shatter his entire world. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, a space designed to make human beings feel small and money feel infinite. From the vantage point of the service corridor, peering through the small reinforced glass window of the side exit, I watched the spectacle unfold. It was a gathering of the Pacific Northwest's financial predators, men in $5,000 suits and women draped in silk, all holding flutes of vintage champagne, waiting to feast on the carcass of my life's work. At the center of it all stood Marcus. He was magnificent in his deception. He stood on a raised platform, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlights, looking every inch the grieving hero. He had chosen a midnight blue tuxedo, a subtle nod to solemnity, and his expression was a masterclass in restrained sorrow. To the hundreds of guests, to the cameras broadcasting live to the business channels. He wasn't just a CEO selling his company for $50 million. He was a man carrying the weight of the world, a man forced to make hard choices because his partner, his unstable, tragic wife had fallen into madness. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus said, his voice amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, rich and smooth like velvet. Tonight is bittersweet for me. We are here to celebrate a new chapter for Sterling Solutions, a merger that will bring our technology to the global stage. But as many of you know, I stand here alone. He paused, looking down at his shoes for a beat before lifting his chin bravely. The crowd hushed. It was perfect theater. My wife, Avery, was the heart of this company in the beginning, he continued, lying with a fluidity that made my stomach clench. But the pressure of this world, it breaks even the strongest among us. While I build our future, she is fighting her own demons in a private facility. I am making this deal today not just for the shareholders, but to ensure she has the care she needs for the rest of her life. This sale is my promise to her." A ripple of sympathetic applause moved through the room. I saw handkerchiefs dabbing at eyes. They bought it. They bought every single word. To his right, standing slightly behind him like a dutiful shadow, was Valerie. She looked stunning in a silver gown, but from where I stood, I could see the cracks in the porcelain. Her smile was tight, brittle. Her eyes were darting around the room, not with excitement, but with fear. She kept touching her clutch, where her phone was undoubtedly hidden, the phone she had used to check the flight manifest I had told her about. "He is good," Elias whispered in my ear. He was standing behind me in the corridor, tapping furiously on a tablet connected to the hotel's internal network. I almost believe him myself. "He believes it," I said, adjusting the lapels of my jacket. "That is why he is dangerous. He has rewritten reality in his head." I looked down at myself. The filth of the garbage truck and the oversized flannel were gone. In their place was a suit of armor made of white wool crepe. It was a tuxedo-cut suit, sharp and severe, tailored to perfection in the last 12 hours. I had bought it with the cash I received from selling my wedding ring, a 3-carat diamond solitaire that Marcus had put on my finger 10 years ago. Selling it felt like exorcising a demon. I was literally wearing the proceeds of our dead marriage to his funeral. "Are we ready?" I asked. Elias looked at the screen of his tablet. "The audio override is synced. The video feed is queued. The police and Gavin are in position at the main entrance. We have one shot at this. Avery, once you step through those doors, there is no going back." "Open it," I commanded. "Wait for the cue," Elias said, holding up a hand. "Let him reach the toast. Let him think he has won." Inside the ballroom, Marcus raised his glass. The representatives from the Dubai conglomerate, a group of stern men in dark suits, stepped forward with the leather-bound contracts. "To the future," Marcus boomed, his smile dazzling. "And to legacy." "Now," Elias said. He hit a key on his tablet. The heavy double doors of the side entrance, the ones Valerie had unlocked for us 10 minutes ago, swung open with a dramatic thud that echoed through the silent room. I didn't sneak in. I walked. I stepped onto the plush carpet, the heels of my white stilettos sinking slightly but my stride remaining unbroken. The sound of the doors opening caused heads to turn. At first, it was just a few people near the back. Then, a ripple of confusion spread. The crowd parted. Not out of respect, but out of shock. I was a ghost walking among them. I was the woman who was supposed to be in a padded room, medicated into oblivion, and yet, here I was, looking sharper, colder, and more alive than anyone else in the room. "Who is that?" someone whispered. Is that her?" Marcus froze. His glass was halfway to his lips. He lowered it slowly, his eyes locking onto mine across the expanse of the ballroom. For a second, just a split second, I saw the terror. It was a raw, primal fear, the look of a man watching his nightmare manifest in flesh and blood. But then, the mask slammed back into place. He set the glass down and stepped off the podium, moving toward me with his hands raised in a gesture of calming benevolence. He was going to play the card, the she escaped card. "Avery," he said. His voice projected loud enough for the microphone to catch, filled with exaggerated concern. "Oh my God, how did you get here? You are not well, darling. You need to be with the doctors." He signaled to the security team stationed at the perimeter. 4 large men in black suits started moving toward me, their intent clear. They were going to grab me, sedate me, and drag me out before I could say a word. "Don't touch her." The voice came from the main entrance behind the crowd. Gavin Hayes, the investigative journalist, marched into the room. Flanking him were 4 officers from the Seattle Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit, their badges gleaming under the chandeliers. Behind them, a cameraman from a local news station, one Gavin had tipped off, was already rolling, the red light of the lens blinking like a warning beacon. The security guards froze. They looked at Marcus, Then at the police, unsure of their jurisdiction. Officers, Marcus said, his voice tight but controlled. Thank you for coming. My wife has escaped from a mental health facility. She is delusional and potentially violent. Please, remove her gently. I didn't look at the police. I didn't look at the crowd. I kept my eyes fixed on Marcus as I walked straight to the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked up the stairs to the podium. Marcus stood there, blocking the microphone, his body rigid. Get off the stage, Avery, he hissed through his teeth. His smile fixed for the cameras, but his eyes murderous. You are embarrassing yourself. Go with the police, and I won't press charges for the scene you are causing. Move, Marcus, I said softly. Or what? He whispered. You have nothing. You are a junkie runaway. I reached into the inner pocket of my white jacket and pulled out a thick blue file folder. I slapped it onto the podium with a sound that cracked like a gunshot. I have this, I said. Marcus looked down. He saw the label on the folder Sterling Solutions, Founders Agreement 2019. Original. His face went gray. The blood drained from his lips so fast he looked like a corpse. He tried to grab the folder, but I was faster. I snatched the microphone from the stand and stepped around him, facing the stunned audience. I apologize for the interruption, I said, my voice clear and steady, ringing through the ballroom. I know you were all expecting a toast, but I think a history lesson is more appropriate. Cut the mic, Marcus screamed, abandoning his calm persona. He lunged at the sound technician at the side of the stage. Cut the damn audio. But Elias was in the system. The technician frantically pushed buttons. But my voice remained live, crisp and undeniable. My name is Avery Caldwell, I said, reclaiming my maiden name. And 7 years ago, I didn't just build this man, I bought him. Marcus grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. That is enough. She is having an episode security. I shook him off with a violent jerk of my shoulder. I am not having an episode. Marcus, I am having a foreclosure. I turned to the representatives from Dubai, who were watching the scene with alarmed expressions. Gentlemen, the contract you are about to sign is void. The man standing before you does not have the authority to sell this company. He owns 40% of the founder's shares. I own 60. A gasp went through the room. She is lying, Marcus shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. She is mentally unstable. Look at the medical reports. She thinks she is an architect from the future or something. I might have lost my car, I continued, my voice rising over his, driving the words into him like nails. I might have lost my savings. I might have lost my dignity in a cell at Serenity Pines. But there is one thing I didn't lose. Marcus, my memory of what you signed in the dark when you were desperate. I pointed to the massive LED screen behind us, the one that had been displaying the Sterling Solutions logo. Elias, I said into the microphone. Show them. The logo flickered and died. In its place, a high-resolution scan of the contract appeared. It was massive, 20 feet tall. Every clause was visible. The highlighted section regarding the Mary Vance Trust and the veto power on mergers was impossible to miss. And at the bottom, blown up to the size of a billboard, was Marcus's signature. That is a forgery, Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. She faked it. It is Photoshop. Is it? I asked. Then explain this. The image on the screen changed. The room went silent as a video began to play. It was grainy. Black and white footage from a wide-angle security camera. I recognized the living room of our penthouse. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. It was the night Marcus had admitted everything to Valerie. Elias had found the footage on the local server backup, the one Marcus thought he had deleted but had merely archived, on the screen. Marcus was pouring a drink. Valerie was sitting on the sofa. Audio from the screen. She is becoming a problem. Marcus, she was asking about the Cayman accounts. Marcus on screen. Don't worry about Avery. She is weak. I have Dr. Samuel ready to sign the commitment papers. Once she is in Serenity Pines, She is legally incapacitated. I will get power of attorney, sell the company, and we will be in Dubai before she even realizes she is locked up. Valerie on screen. What if she fights back? Marcus on screen. She won't. I have gaslit her so hard, she doesn't know what day it is. I took her car, her money, her mind. She is nothing. Valerie, she is just the ladder I climbed to get here. The video froze on Marcus's face, sneering and triumphant. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I turned to look at Marcus. He wasn't moving. He was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open, his hands trembling by his sides. The mask was gone. There was no grieving husband left. There was only the naked, ugly truth of a predator caught in the light. I looked at Valerie. She was standing by the edge of the stage, tears streaming down her face, but she wasn't looking at Marcus. She was looking at me, and in her eyes, there was a terrified respect. She had opened the door. She had saved herself. I turned back to the microphone. The police are here to escort you out. Marcus, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried to the back of the room. Not because I am crazy, but because you are a fraud. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. The sound broke the spell. The room erupted into chaos. Flashbulbs exploded like lightning. The Dubai investors slammed their portfolios shut and marched out, and the police officers stepped onto the stage, handcuffs glinting in the stage lights, moving toward the man who had thought he was a king, only to find out he was just a tenant in a castle I had built. The silence that followed the dropping of the microphone did not last. It was shattered by a collective gasp that seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the room, followed immediately by a roar of confusion and outrage. The grand ballroom, moments ago a sanctuary of polite society and whispered business deals, transformed into a gladiatorial arena. The facade of the perfect merger, the perfect CEO, and the perfect future crumbled into dust before our very eyes. I stood on the stage, my heart beating with a slow, powerful rhythm. I was no longer the trembling victim in the back of a garbage truck. I was the executioner, and the blade had just fallen. The lead representative of the Dubai conglomerate, a man named Mr. Al-Fayed, who was known for his stoic demeanor, stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the parquet floor. He looked at Marcus, then at me, and finally at the open folder on the podium. He signaled to his team. In unison, 4 lawyers in expensive suits closed their briefcases with a simultaneous snap that sounded like a verdict. Mr. Sterling, Mr. Al-Fayed said, his voice cutting through the rising din. We were informed that the ownership structure of this company was absolute. We were informed that all liabilities had been disclosed. It appears we were misinformed. No, wait. Marcus scrambled forward, his hands shaking as he reached out toward the investors. Please listen to me. This is a stunt. She is vindictive. That document is ancient history. It has no legal standing. I stepped back to the microphone, picking it up from the floor. I didn't need to shout. I had the truth. It has every legal standing. Marcus, I said, my voice cool and sharp. But you are forgetting the most important part. You are forgetting Article 9, Section 4, the Morality and Financial Integrity Clause. I signaled to the back of the room. Elias, the massive screen behind us shifted again. The video of Marcus's confession vanished, replaced by a zoomed-in image of a specific paragraph in the contract. The text was bold and damning. Read it, Marcus, I challenged him. It states that in the event the primary founder, that is you, engages in proven infidelity, fraud, or actions that devalue the company reputation, the lien on your remaining 40% of shares is executed immediately. They don't just get frozen, they transfer. I looked out at the audience, making eye contact with the cameras. As of this moment, Marcus Sterling does not own 40% of this company. He owns 0%. I am the sole proprietor of Sterling Solutions. You lying witch, Marcus screamed. The veneer of the sophisticated businessman vanished completely. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Veins bulged in his neck. He looked like a cornered animal. He lunged at me. His fingers curled into claws, desperate to silence the voice that was stripping him bare. "I will kill you," he roared, closing the distance, but he never reached me. 2 officers from the Economic Crimes Unit moved with practiced efficiency. They intercepted him before he could take 3 steps. One officer grabbed his left arm, the other his right, twisting them behind his back. Marcus struggled, kicking and thrashing, his midnight blue tuxedo jacket tearing at the shoulder seam. "Get off me!" he bellowed, spit flying from his mouth. "Do you know who I am? I am Marcus Sterling. I built this city. That woman is a thief." "Mr. Sterling, you are under arrest," the lead detective said, his voice bored and unimpressed. "For what?" Marcus shrieked. "Being successful. This is a setup." "Elias," I said again. The screen changed for the 3rd time. This was the final blow. It was the data from the black ledger Martha Roberts had kept, cross-referenced with the USB drive I had retrieved from the bank. It was a flowchart of money. Red lines traced the path of millions of dollars siphoned from the employee pension fund, routed through shell companies in Delaware, and finally landing in the Apex strategy account in the Cayman Islands. "We have the wire transfers, Marcus," I said, looking down at him as he struggled in the grip of the police. "We have the dates, we have the amounts, and thanks to your former accountant, Mrs. Roberts, who is currently giving a sworn deposition to the district attorney, we have your handwritten notes authorizing the theft." The crowd murmured darker now. Theft was one thing. Stealing from employees was another. The socialites and business titans in the room began to back away, distancing themselves from the man they had been toasting 5 minutes ago. But the final knife in his back came from the one person he thought he owned completely. Valerie stepped forward. She wiped the tears from her face. She looked at Marcus, who was now pinned against the podium, panting and wild-eyed. "He made me do it," Valerie said. Her voice was shaking, but it was loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Marcus froze. He looked at her, betrayed. "Valerie, shut up. Don't say a word." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I am not going to prison for you. Marcus, I saw the deed transfer this morning. I know you moved the Aspen house into a holding company. You were going to leave me behind just like you left her." She turned to the police officers. "He forced me to lie to the doctors. He wrote the script for what I was supposed to say to Dr. Samuel at the clinic. He told me that if I didn't help him commit Avery, he would fire me and make sure I never worked in this town again." "You traitorous little—" Marcus lunged again, but the officers slammed him down onto the stage floor. The thud of his body hitting the wood echoed through the room. At that exact moment, a cacophony of digital chirps and pings erupted from the audience. Every phone in the room lit up simultaneously. Gavin Hayes had pressed the button. "The article is out," someone shouted from the press pit. "The Seattle Chronicle just dropped the exposé The Sterling Fraud, how a tech CEO stole millions and framed his wife. The stock," another voice cried out. "Look at the ticker." Someone held up a tablet. The graph for Sterling Solutions was a vertical red line plunging into the abyss. The stock was in freefall. Within seconds, billions of dollars in market cap evaporated. The empire wasn't just crumbling, it was being atomized. "Mr." Al-Fayed looked at his phone, then at me. He gave a single, respectful nod. He turned to Marcus, who was now being hauled to his feet, his face pressed against the floorboards, leaving a red mark on his cheek. "The deal is terminated." "Mr." Al-Fayed said coldly, "we do not do business with criminals." The lead detective pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The sound of the ratcheting metal was crisp and final. "Click, click, Marcus Sterling," the detective recited, the words ringing out like a hymn of justice. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Marcus looked up. His hair was disheveled, hanging in his eyes. His tie was crooked. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrific realization. He looked at the audience, searching for a friendly face, but found only disgust. He looked at Valerie, but she had turned her back on him, finally. He looked at me. "Avery," he croaked, his voice cracking. "Avery, please. We can fix this. I can explain. Don't let them take me. I am your husband." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved for a decade. I looked at the man who had held my hand while I cried over our infertility, all while planning to replace me. I looked at the man who had locked me in a cage and thrown away the key. I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a profound, icy hollow where my love used to be. I walked over to him until I was standing toe to toe. I leaned in close, so only he could hear me over the snapping of camera shutters. "You are not my husband, Marcus," I whispered. "You are just a breach of contract." I straightened up and nodded to the officers. "Get him out of my sight." They dragged him away. He didn't walk with dignity. He was half carried, his feet dragging, shouting incoherently about his lawyers, about his rights, about how this was all a mistake. The cameras followed him, flashing relentlessly, capturing every second of his humiliation for the morning papers. I stood alone on the stage. The lights were hot on my face. The room was still chaotic, reporters shouting questions, investors yelling into their phones, waiters unsure whether to clear the champagne glasses. But inside my head, it was quiet. I had done it. I had taken the wreckage of my life and built a weapon. I had reclaimed my name, my fortune, and my truth. A reporter from CNN pushed to the front of the stage, thrusting a microphone toward me. "Mrs. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling. How do you feel? What are you going to do now that you control the company? Is it true you escaped from a mental institution?" I looked at the reporter. I looked at the sea of hungry eyes. I could stay. I could give an interview. I could bask in the glory of the victory. I could become the media darling of the week. But I didn't want their adoration. I didn't want their pity. I was done performing for people who only cared about the show. I turned away from the microphone. I walked past the stunned Dubai investors. I walked past Valerie, who was sobbing into her hands while a police officer took her statement. I walked down the stairs of the stage and onto the floor of the ballroom. The crowd parted for me again, but this time there was fear in their eyes. They looked at me with the kind of reverence reserved for natural disasters. They knew that the woman in the white suit was not to be trifled with. I pushed through the double doors at the back of the room, leaving the noise and the heat behind. The hallway was cool and empty. I kept walking, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I passed the hotel concierge, who stared at me with his mouth open. I walked out the main entrance of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. The night air was crisp and smelled of rain. Outside, a frenzy of paparazzi had already gathered. Alerted by the police scanners, as soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, a wall of flashing lights blinded me. "Avery, over here. Did you really frame him? Look this way. Avery." I didn't blink. I didn't stop. I walked straight through the gauntlet of cameras, my head held high, my face an impassive mask. I didn't offer a comment. My silence was louder than anything I could say. I scanned the street, ignoring the limousines and the police cruisers. I was looking for something else, and there it was, parked illegally in a loading zone across the street, looking wonderfully out of place among the luxury vehicles, was the battered blue sedan. It was dented. It was rusty. It had one headlight that was slightly dimmer than the other. Leaning against the hood, wearing his new suit, but looking as weary as I felt, was Elias. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching me. I crossed the street, leaving the screaming reporters behind on the curb. I walked up to him. "You made quite a scene," Elias said, his voice rough. "I finished what we started," I replied. "The police have him," Elias said. "I saw them load him into the wagon. It is over. Avery." I looked back at the hotel. The golden lights of the ballroom spilled out onto the street. But the party was dead. The empire of Sterling Solutions, built on lies and theft, had fallen. Yes, I said, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 7 years. It is over. Where to? Elias asked, opening the passenger door for me. The handle squeaked, a sound that felt more honest than any symphony. I looked at the car. It was a piece of junk. It smelled of old oil and stale coffee, but it was the chariot that had carried me to freedom. Anywhere, I said, sliding into the seat. Just drive. Elias nodded and got in behind the wheel. The engine coughed and sputtered to life, blowing a cloud of gray smoke that drifted into the faces of the paparazzi. We pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic of downtown Seattle. I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't look back at the life I was leaving behind. I watched the city lights blur past the window, a kaleidoscope of rain and neon. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet pouch that had held my grandmother's earrings. It was empty now, but it felt heavy with possibility. Marcus had thought he could bury me. He had forgotten that I was a seed. And tonight, I had finally broken through the concrete. The adrenaline that had fueled me through the gala and the chaotic escape eventually burned off, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. The morning after the arrest, I did not sleep. I sat in a diner with Elias, drinking bad coffee and watching the news cycle churn. But while the world was obsessed with the scandal, I was already moving on to the autopsy of my former life. The time for dramatic gestures was over. Now, it was time for the suffocating, meticulous work of the law. I fired James, my former attorney who had sold me out for a retainer fee, via a courier letter. I didn't even dignify him with a phone call. In his place, I hired Sarah Jenkins, a ferocious litigator from a boutique firm who specialized in corporate asset recovery. Sarah was 60 years old, wore sensible shoes, and had a mind like a steel trap. When I walked into her office, still wearing my white suit from the night before, she didn't offer me sympathy. She offered me a strategy. "We are going to strip him to the bone, Avery," Sarah said, laying a yellow legal pad on her desk. "Criminal court will take his freedom. Civil court will take everything else." The legal process was a slow-moving glacier, but it was unstoppable. Marcus, true to his nature, did not go down quietly. From his holding cell at the King County Jail, he launched a desperate, flailing defense. He claimed that the Black Ledger was a fabrication created by a disgruntled accountant. He claimed that I had hacked the company servers to plant the incriminating evidence. He even tried to throw his own chief financial officer under the bus, claiming that he was merely a visionary CEO who was too busy inventing the future to notice that his underlings were laundering millions of dollars through the Cayman Islands. It was pathetic, and it didn't work. The evidence we had gathered was not just a smoking gun, it was a firing squad. Martha Roberts's handwritten notes matched the digital footprints perfectly. The USB drive I had retrieved from the safety deposit box contained emails where Marcus explicitly discussed the tax evasion scheme with his offshore bankers. And then, there was Valerie. Valerie's testimony was the final nail. She sat in the deposition room, pale and shaking, and detailed every conversation, every threat, and every plan Marcus had made to have me committed. She told the prosecutors about the fake medical files. She told them about the bribes paid to Dr. Samuel at Serenity Pines. She painted a picture of a man who was not just a white-collar criminal, but a sociopath. 3 months after the arrest, just before the trial was set to begin, Marcus requested a meeting. "You don't have to go," Sarah told me. "He is fishing for a plea deal. He wants to manipulate you." "I know," I said, buttoning my coat. "That is why I have to go. I need to close the door." The visitation room was cold and smelled of bleach and misery. I sat behind the thick glass partition. When the guards brought Marcus in, I almost didn't recognize him. The golden boy of Seattle Tech was gone. In his place was a gaunt, unshaven man with gray skin and eyes that darted nervously around the room. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He looked small. He sat down and picked up the phone. I picked up mine. "Avery," he said, his voice raspy. "Thank God you came. You look beautiful." I stared at him, my face impassive. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want you to stop this," he pleaded, leaning forward until his forehead touched the glass. "You have made your point. You won. I am ruined. But you can't let them send me to prison for 15 years. I will die in there. Avery, please, tell them you exaggerated. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can work something out. I still have money hidden that they didn't find. We can go away together. Start over." I listened to him, amazed by the depth of his delusion. He still thought he could charm me. He still thought I was the woman who lived for his approval. "You don't get it," I said calmly. "There is no us. There never was. There was just you, and the resources you could extract from me." "That is not true," he cried, tears welling in his eyes. "I loved you. I did it for us. I wanted to build an empire for us." "You tried to lock me in an asylum," I reminded him. "You tried to drug me into oblivion so you could replace me with your mistress and steal my inheritance. That isn't love, Marcus. That is a hostility." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single, crisp document. I slid it through the metal slot at the bottom of the partition. "What is this?" he asked, staring at it. "Divorce papers," I said. "I am filing on the grounds of cruel and inhuman treatment, adultery, and felony conviction. You are going to sign them, Marcus, and you are not going to contest a single clause. If you do, I will release the audio recordings of you mocking your own mother's funeral to the press. Remember those Elias found them on your private server." Marcus went pale. He remembered. "You are cold," he whispered, looking at me with genuine fear. "You used to be so sweet." "You killed that woman," I said, standing up. "Goodbye, Marcus." I hung up the phone and walked out. I didn't look back. I felt a weight lift off my chest, a physical sensation of lightness that made me dizzy. The sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. I sat in the front row, flanked by Sarah and Elias. When the judge read the verdict, the room went silent. "Marcus Sterling," the judge said, peering over her glasses, "for the crimes of grand larceny, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit unlawful confinement. This court sentences you to 15 years in a federal correctional facility, with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years. Furthermore, the court orders the immediate forfeiture of all personal assets to pay restitution to the victims." The gavel came down with a sound like a thunderclap. Bang! Marcus didn't scream. He slumped in his chair, putting his head in his hands. It was over. The predator was caged, but my work was not done. The next morning, I walked into the headquarters of Sterling Solutions. The glass doors slid open for me, and the security guards, new ones, hired by Sarah, nodded respectfully. I took the elevator to the top floor, to the boardroom where Marcus had held court for so long. The room was filled with the executive board, 10 men and women who had enabled Marcus for years. They had looked the other way when the numbers didn't add up. They had laughed at his jokes and enjoyed the bonuses funded by stolen pension money. Now, they looked at me with terror. I stood at the head of the table. I didn't sit down. "This meeting will be short," I said. "As the sole owner of the controlling shares of this company, I am restructuring the leadership effective immediately." I slid a stack of envelopes across the polished mahogany table. "These are your termination notices," I said. "For all of you." "You can't do this," the CFO sputtered, his face turning red. "We have contracts. We have severance packages." "Your contracts were with a criminal enterprise," I said coldly. "And your severance packages are being frozen pending a federal investigation into your complicity in Marcus's fraud. If I were you, I would save your energy for your defense attorneys. Get out." They scrambled for the door, clutching their envelopes. Their golden parachutes turned into lead weights. When the room was empty, the door opened again. Elias walked in. He was wearing a new suit, one that fit him perfectly. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright. "The place is clear," he asked. "The rot is gone," I replied. "Now we rebuild." I pointed to the empty chair at the right hand of the table, the seat Marcus had reserved for sycophants. "Take a seat." "Mr. Thorne," I said, "I believe the position of Chief Technology Officer is vacant. I need someone who actually understands the code this company was built on. I need someone with integrity." Elias smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. He sat down. "I have some ideas. Avery, we can pivot the tech. Move away from the invasive data mining Marcus loved. Focus on secure, ethical infrastructure. We can save the company." "Do it," I said. "It is yours to run." "Elias, I am just the owner. I have other things to clean up." The final act of purging took place at the penthouse. I returned there only once, accompanied by a team of movers. The air in the apartment was stale, smelling of expensive cologne and betrayal. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture I had once picked out with such care. It all felt like a stage set for a play that had been canceled. I sold it all: the Italian leather sofas, the custom art pieces, the silk rugs. I sold the wine collection Marcus had bragged about. I sold the jewelry he had given me, trinkets bought with stolen money to keep me quiet. And then there was the car. The police had returned the Mercedes G-Wagon to me after processing it for evidence. It sat in the garage, gleaming and black. I ran my hand over the hood. I used to love this car. It had been a symbol of my success, my safety. Now, it just reminded me of the night I was arrested. I called a local auction house. "Sell it," I told them. "Sell everything." The proceeds from the liquidation of the penthouse and the car came to over $4 million. I didn't keep a cent. I wrote a check to the Phoenix Foundation, a new nonprofit I had established to provide legal aid and safe housing for women trapped in financially abusive relationships. It was the money Marcus had tried to steal from me, now weaponized to help women escape men exactly like him. Valerie's fate was less dramatic, but no less final. Because of her cooperation with the district attorney, she avoided prison time. She was sentenced to 3 years of probation and community service. The last time I saw her was outside the courthouse. She was carrying her baby, a newborn boy, wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked tired, stripped of the glamour she had worn like armor. She saw me and stopped. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. A small, humble acknowledgement of the mercy I had shown by not pushing for her incarceration. I nodded back. We weren't friends. We never would be. But we were survivors of the same shipwreck. She got into a taxi and headed for the airport. She was moving back to Ohio to live with her parents. She was starting over with nothing but her son and her freedom. It was more than she deserved. Perhaps, but it was enough. A week later, I stood on the deck of a small rental cottage on the coast of Oregon. The air was salty and cold. Whipping my short, dark hair across my face, I held a mug of hot tea in my hands, feeling the warmth seep into my fingers, behind me. The cottage was simple: no smart home systems, no cameras, no servants, just wood and glass and silence. I looked out at the Pacific Ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks, a relentless, powerful rhythm that had existed long before Marcus Sterling and would exist long after he was forgotten. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, sharp air. I was 32 years old. I was single. I was the owner of a major tech firm. Though I planned to be a silent partner, I had scars, invisible ones on my psyche and visible ones on my heart. But as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the water in shades of gold and violet, I realized something profound. I wasn't Avery Sterling anymore. I wasn't the victim in the psychiatric ward. I wasn't even the vengeful ex-wife in the white suit. I was just Avery. I had taken back my name. I had taken back my agency. I had walked through the fire and come out the other side, not as ash, but as steel. I took a sip of tea and smiled. It was a small, private smile, just for me and the ocean. The contract had been fulfilled. The debt was paid, and for the first time in 10 years, the future didn't look like a cage. It looked like the horizon vast, terrifying, and completely, wonderfully open. It has been exactly 365 days since the gavel fell in that federal courtroom. A full year, the seasons have turned, washing away the gray Seattle rain and bringing a summer that feels warmer and brighter than any I can remember. I am sitting on the porch of a small cedar cabin overlooking Lake Crescent, a body of water so blue it looks like a piece of the sky has fallen to earth. There is dirt under my fingernails again, real, honest soil. I spent the morning planting hydrangeas and rhododendrons, shaping the earth not for a client who wants to impress their neighbors, but simply because I wanted to see something beautiful grow. My life today would be unrecognizable to the Avery Sterling who lived in the penthouse. I am no longer the terrified woman who flinched at the sound of a door closing. I am no longer the vengeful warrior in the white suit who stormed a ballroom to reclaim her company. I am just Avery, and for the first time in a decade, that is enough. Sterling Solutions still exists, but the name is the only thing that remains the same. Under the guidance of Elias Thorne, who is now the undisputed Chief Technology Officer, the company has undergone a radical metamorphosis. We stopped selling user data to the highest bidder. We dismantled the surveillance algorithms that Marcus had prized so highly. Instead, we pivoted to building encrypted communication tools for journalists and activists in oppressive regimes. We build digital shields, not digital cages. The profit margins are significantly lower than they used to be. The shareholders who only cared about quarterly dividends have fled, replaced by investors who care about ethical sustainability, and I could not be happier. I attend board meetings once a month via video call, usually wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, just to ensure we are staying true to the mission. I am the majority owner, the silent guardian, but I let Elias steer the ship. He has earned it. My days are not filled with galas or shopping trips to Paris. They are filled with drafting paper and pencils. I return to my roots as a landscape architect, but on my own terms. I take on small projects: a community garden for a local school, a meditation park for a hospital, a backyard renovation for a young family. I charge what people can afford, and sometimes I do the work for free. There is a profound healing in designing spaces that allow people to breathe, to connect with nature, to feel safe. I am rebuilding the world around me, one garden at a time, just as I have rebuilt myself. But my most important work happens at the Phoenix Foundation. I used every cent of the $4 million from the sale of the penthouse, the jewelry, and the luxury cars to start it. We are a small operation, housed in a modest office in downtown Seattle, but our reach is growing. We provide high-powered legal representation to women who are trapped in financially abusive marriages, women who, like me, have been gaslit into believing they are crazy, or who have had their assets stolen by partners they trusted. We provide forensic accountants to find hidden money. We provide safe houses that look like homes, not institutions. Every week, I receive letters. They pile up on my desk, handwritten notes on stationery or scraps of notebook paper. Thank you for believing me when no one else would. One reads, "Because of you, I have my children back," says another. They call me a hero. They call me a savior. But when I read their words, I do not feel like a hero. I feel like a survivor who simply reached back to pull the next person out of the fire. I know the darkness they have lived in. I know the specific, suffocating weight of a silence enforced by fear. Helping them is not charity. It is solidarity. It is my way of telling the universe that Marcus did not win, that his cruelty only served to create a force for good that he could never comprehend. "Coffee is ready," a voice calls out, breaking my reverie. I look up to see Elias stepping onto the porch, carrying a tray with 3 steaming mugs. He looks younger than he did a year ago. The lines of bitterness around his mouth have softened, replaced by the easy confidence of a man who loves his work. Following him is Martha Roberts. She is retired for real this time, but she serves as the treasurer for the Phoenix Foundation, keeping our books with the same ferocious precision she used to bring down an empire. "You are thinking too much again, Avery," Martha says, settling into the wicker chair next to me. I can see the gears turning. Just reflecting, I say, taking the mug Elias offers. It is a good day. It is a perfect day, Elias agrees, sitting on the railing. By the way, I finished the restoration on the truck. The engine is purring like a kitten. I look down the gravel driveway. There it sits, the old pickup truck. It is the same vehicle we used to escape that night in the chaos of my memory. I sometimes confused it with the sedan we abandoned, but this truck was the one we found in the scrapyard later, the one that carried us through the final leg of the journey when we had nothing left. It was a rusted heap of metal then, a symbol of our desperation. Now, it is painted a deep, lustrous forest green. The dents have been smoothed out. The chrome bumper shines in the sunlight. It is sturdy. It is reliable. It is a lot like us. We are not family by blood, I think, looking at Elias and Martha laughing as they argue about the best way to prune a rose bush. We are a family forged in the trenches. They are the people who saw me when I was invisible. They are the ones who risked everything when there was no guarantee of a reward. This, I realize, is what dignity looks like. It is not found in a bank account balance or a designer label. It is not found in the envy of strangers. Dignity is the ability to stand on your own 2 feet after you have been knocked down. It is the quiet certainty that you are surrounded by people who love you for your soul, not your status. Marcus tried to strip me of my dignity by taking my things, but he never understood that dignity is something you carry inside you. It is the steel in your spine. Later that afternoon, I decide to take the truck for a drive. I need to feel the wind in my hair. I wave goodbye to Elias and Martha, promising to be back in time for dinner. I climb into the driver's seat. The leather is worn but comfortable. I turn the key, and the engine roars to life, a deep, throaty sound that speaks of power and endurance. I drive south, following the winding highway that hugs the coastline. To my right, the Pacific Ocean stretches out to infinity, wild and restless. To my left, the dense forests of the Olympic Peninsula stand guard. I roll down the window, letting the salty air fill the cab. About 20 miles down the road, I pass a large, imposing complex surrounded by high fences and razor wire. It is the Federal Correctional Institution where inmate number 8940 is currently serving the first year of his 15-year sentence. Marcus is in there. He is living in a 6x8 cell, wearing a uniform he didn't choose, eating food he hates, and following orders from guards who don't care about his vision for the future. For a brief moment, I think about slowing down. I think about looking at the guard towers. But then, I keep my foot steady on the accelerator. I keep my eyes on the road ahead. I don't turn my head. I don't feel a spike of anger. I don't feel a pang of pity. I feel absolutely nothing for the man inside those walls. He is a ghost story I have finished reading. He is a shadow that vanished when I turned on the light. The past is dead, and I have no interest in visiting a graveyard. I drive for another hour until the road curves around a high cliff. I pull the truck into a scenic overlook and kill the engine. The sun is beginning to set, painting the sky in vibrant strokes of violet, tangerine, and gold. The ocean reflects the colors, turning into a shifting canvas of light. I step out of the truck and walk to the edge of the cliff. The wind is strong here, whipping my clothes around me, but I stand firm. I close my eyes and listen to the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below. It is the sound of freedom. I think about the journey that brought me here. I think about the naive girl who sold her parents' home for love. I think about the broken woman in the psychiatric ward who thought her life was over. I think about the fugitive in the garbage truck, and I think about the woman standing here now. I open my eyes and look at the horizon. A smile spreads across my face. It is not a polite smile for a camera. It is not a forced smile for a husband who demands perfection. It is a real, genuine smile that starts in my chest and radiates outward. It is the smile of a woman who owns herself completely. Marcus tried to write the end of my story. He thought he could turn me into a tragedy, but he forgot that I was the author all along. He was just a plot twist, A painful, terrible plot twist, but one that pushed me to find a strength I never knew I possessed. He took my car, he took my savings, he took my dignity, but in doing so, he forced me to find a new car, earn my own worth, and build a dignity that is bulletproof. I lean against the hood of the green truck, watching the last sliver of the sun dip below the water. He took my past, but accidentally gave me my future, and that future belongs entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to Avery's journey of resilience and justice. It has been an emotional ride, and I hope this story reminded you that no matter how dark it gets, you always have the power to rewrite your own ending. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city, a quiet countryside, or maybe somewhere across the ocean? Please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Avery's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel Scarlet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.